There's this sort of principle in science where there is this external reality, and we're in the business of seeking truth of this external reality. Um, I lost hope in that sort of belief a long time ago, and I don't think that's actually the case of what science is about. I don't think as researchers we actually do that at any given time. I want to actually talk about what this is and what's going on. And the reason is because we are human, and that goes for all of the sciences. It's not just my domain of the social sciences, but it's all of them. And it really comes down to the sort of filtering of knowledge that happens of what we think is important or necessary to get the word out with it. And then because of that, that we have a very, very colored reality that I actually just think it's often patently false. So the reason why I actually know that is I'm trying to live my life as open as I possibly can on social media in various different ways. And the sort of and I actually study a lot of the literature in this area to sort of see how to actually do this. And it just simply often doesn't apply in any sort of way. And we also that was my sort of first inkling. It's like, you know what? All of this stuff that we talk about in the literature just doesn't simply apply to my case. And I wonder how many other people that are actually like that. And I think about like, why is that the case? What's going on there? Well, there is this process that happens, and it's across the board. Once you start studying it, you look at either the sociology of science or the philosophy of science. People actually do a really good job of this. And they seem kind of fluffy, but they're really hardcore sciences. And essentially, they just study how science is actually produced and how it's actually communicated. And what you'll find out is that if you find things that are just you study a particular area and you find something that just doesn't really jive with how we think about things, it's not necessarily just about significant results that people talk about often, but it's anything that just doesn't jive or is not easily communicated or is poorly communicated, just will not make it through the review process. So a lot of young scholars, for example, they'll realize it's really hard to communicate in a certain way to get your message across, like super hard to get your message across in an appropriate way. I think it's like if you're very good at writing, your message can come across, particularly in English, but almost everybody else struggles to get that through. And as a consequence, and this is just, and I'll talk about the flip side in 1 second. As a consequence, we have a great deal of filtering that happens based on what flavors and preferences other people have and actually get a say. Now, the flip side is, and it's equally true, is that there's many things that people work on that are just simply not interesting or they can't communicate it. So people just don't pay attention to it. And that is absolutely true. And that's how you know, got to think about that is on all of these social media that I put out, if it's not slanted in a certain way, nobody cares. It's not if you don't have the right titles that are often usually very provocative, nobody will listen to it. And even still, if I have the right titles to make it provocative so that people will listen to it, some people will listen to it, others will take a look at it and they'll get angry and say the complete opposite. So you kind of get stuck, or I'm stuck in between, like, how do I actually get this so people pay attention to it? And it's often very provocative or adversarial um, for most people to pay attention to it. But then, like, the people will often see it and say, I don't want to pay attention to this because that's just simply not true. So, this is the ultimate challenge with communicating scientific findings particularly if you have any natural characteristics that give it away that you're part of a group that you shouldn't pay attention to. Let's just say that as we as human beings tend not to pay attention to as much. That depending on whatever culture that you're in too, that's is very culturally dependent. Whatever the dominant culture actually is, um, that's that's the that's the challenge with it is how do you get the message across? And you'll hear it's just countless stories over and over and over again. In fact, I think it's the quintessential story of most researchers and most scientists is that you're rejected for most of your life until you're 65, and then all of a sudden everybody says, "Oh, that's a great idea." Other than the ones that sort of flowed through because they had the right opportunities and all that kind of stuff. Um, which there's a bunch, but there's also a huge class of people that often are neglected in science until very far down the road, and all of a sudden we pay attention to them. And so this is the challenge: is how do you, in a world often that has a lot of ambiguity, a lot of uncertainty, how do you get the message out? And that is the fundamental thing with science and research. It's not clear ever, and that's for every field in terms of what actually happens. So that's often why I just simply don't believe that there is this sort of truthfulness that happens. It's not necessarily of that people are not finding true things. It's just how do you communicate it? And let's say you actually find a null result that simply is just, you find it just doesn't exist. How do you communicate that? And how do you go against the majority that says otherwise? That is challenging social process that, we know more about that in politics than we know in science. So I think, I'm talking about sort of big politics. So I think, in my view, I think the sort of truthfulness assumption just doesn't often hold up to reality. And I don't know what a better solution is than what we actually have at this moment, but I think we can have some tweaks. And I think we can really work on this and democratize it a lot more. That's what the Reciprocity Project is about. How do we work on this, make it more democratized? How do we get more people interested in doing science that wouldn't normally be interested in it? And it's a hard problem. I've spent a great deal of time and money and effort on it, and I still haven't figured it out. So maybe at some point you'll help me figure it out, or somebody will listen to this in the jungles of the Amazon because they have a cell phone, and they'll reach out to me and say, I have this idea. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.